Alrighty. Well, why don't we get started? Everyone can see my screen, it looks like, so that's great news. Technology check, everyone can hear me, so that's great news. Alrighty. Well, what is it, Thursday now? So we're almost through the week. I'm definitely curious to know what's been most useful so far and what stood out. We've seen some really interesting talks and good presentations and some great questions this week. So I hope that we get to hear some of the key messages that stood out for you. This session is one of my favorite topics. If you've ever talked to me about communication at all, you'll know I get pretty excited about it. And it's one of my favorite topics for a whole bunch of reasons. Mostly because humans are so funny and we typically think that we're really good at listening, but really we actually mostly suck at it. Unless we're intentionally trying to be good at it in a single moment, it's not something that necessarily comes naturally. So the goal of this session is to help you experience what listening is like, how to practice presence in your moments of dialogue, and how to support growing your listening skills. So even if you think you're really good at it, we're going to work on taking it even deeper. Because what happens when you're really listening to someone is pretty magical. And I actually use that word sparingly, so believe it or not, but it really is. When you're tuned into what someone's trying to tell you and they feel that, it's like walls come down, barriers break, and those miscommunications, they start to fade away. People know when they're being heard. So not only do some of those friction points start to dissolve, but the connection that you create when you're truly listening, that influences the ability that you have to impact people. So again, if you've done sessions with me, you know that one of my favorite places to play is in the discomfort zone. So I hope you experience a little bit of discomfort today, because that's where growth and capacity building come from, right? Muscles get sore when you push them just a little bit harder and now they're growing. Your brain gets frustrated when you take on a challenge and it's a little bit harder than you're used to, a little bit uncomfortable. So stepping out of your comfort zone just sets you up to explore something in a different way. So those are my goals, and I do encourage you, if you are feeling like you want to step out and not participate in a breakout, maybe you're like, that's too uncomfortable, I really encourage you to like stay in it, because communication and listening skills are something you actually can't get better at unless you practice, intentionally practice. You can know all the right things about how to listen, but until you start practicing and building that habit, it's not something you can actually get better at. So if you do feel like, hey, I can't do it, I really encourage you to stay in and try. Let's get started now. So the session called How to Talk So People Will Listen is actually starts with how to listen so people will talk, because that's really what gets people talking, and then listening to what you have to say is by starting with listening. Let's get started. So why do we want people to talk? Why do we want to be good at listening? As a leader, I feel strong listening skills are one of the most overlooked aspects of communication. So much content is at communicating your message, making sure people understand what you're saying, being clear. So much of it is about that sending part of the communication equation. But as a team lead, you're the center for information, right? You're where it flows through it for a lot of communication flows. So the ability to listen is one of the most important responsibilities. You can look at team effectiveness, satisfaction, engagement, performance, the experience of flow, if you're familiar with that language. So many areas are impacted when a team lead has the ability to really listen to what their team is trying to say. In my opinion, miscommunication, the cause of, let's say, 99% of problems, happens because of ineffective listening skills. Think about that conflict that created that stagnant tension between teams, probably caused by the inability to really listen and understand a different perspective, or by having another person's opinion not felt like it was heard. That lack of progress on a project, likely caused by some missed expectation, an expectation that wasn't clearly understood. So being able to effectively listen has an exponential an exponential effect. When you listen to understand, you're more likely to know what's expected of you and your team. Listening to understand. And we'll talk about the difference between listening to understand and listening to respond. There's a difference. When you listen to really understand, you're more likely to be able to identify those subtle issues and risks that are impacting team success. So maybe imagine when a dependent team member is working on a project and they just it doesn't seem like a really important sentence they say, but they just mention some of the problems that they're having in their project. If you're in the moment with them and you're really listening, you're more likely going to pick up on a connection that their problem is also your problem. And so while they might not have raised it in a way that's like, hey, watch out for this, you listening, you'll catch it. Most importantly, effective listening just has a profound and exponential effect on relationships between you and your team members and between your team and other teams. The best part about this session is that what we cover today, again, can just be used in all areas of your life, every relationship, listening as part of that human connection. As a communications and emotional intelligence coach, I coach couples and mother-daughter relationships, and listening and the art of getting someone's world is one of the foundational skills that we work on, because the ability to have collaborative and healthy relationships is essential in your ability in showing up in your best self, in your ability to effectively lead. So not only does effective listening come in handy at work, but it's also something that can be really useful in your relationships that you have. Alrighty, I'm just going to make sure that this part is going to work. I'm going to share that. Okay, well, let's just take a look at what listening is not. You may laugh at this, but I can guarantee you've been in a conversation where this has happened.
Lately, every person I deal with seems to disappoint me. Every meeting starts late, every answer is misleading, every deadline is ignored, and all work is shoddily done. I guess what I'm saying is that today, I need some empathy.
You are totally blocking my view of the wall.
It may seem a little hyperbolic, but for sure, you have been in a conversation where you were saying something and they totally didn't hear what you said and came back with an entirely different response or part of a conversation. So we talked a little bit about the exponential effects of really hearing someone, but let's just take a second to consider the other side of this equation. When a person has experiences of not being heard, so when one of your team members has experiences of not being heard, they're learning that their opinion doesn't matter. When you signal that someone's opinion doesn't matter, you're potentially silencing a pool of ideas that could solve a problem, suggest an approach that makes life easier. You're also signaling that their ideas aren't important, which can have a clear impact on morale and engagement. I can point you to a lot of studies, of course, that's the impact of low morale and engagement on productivity, quality, results. All these things are connected. So whether you have time for it or not, and we will talk about how to manage situations where you don't have time, the gain that you get from intentionally listening will always outweigh the cost of signaling that you're not interested in what someone else is saying. So this next example I'm going to walk you through is fun for me to share, but also kind of hard for me. It's an example just of how complex really listening is, how much practice it takes, how much intentional focus it requires to be good at it. And I don't think that anyone can be good at it all the time, but we can increase the number of times, the likelihood that we'll show up in a way that promotes relationships and understanding. So this next this is an actual conversation that I had with my 14-year-old daughter this past month. And in this conversation, she is sharing her intention with me, and I reply with an alternative solution. And she continues to try to let me know what she's trying to say, and I continue to let her know what I think. Now, best part about teenagers, or my teenager anyways, is that she is always ready to point out when I'm not practicing what I preach. She has been to enough of my mother-daughter workshops to know what it's supposed to look like, and she's very open to letting me know. So you can You can take a moment to think about this type of conversation. This is one in the household, but like I said, listening is something you do in all relationships. So she then lets me know what she's thinking, and my feelings are hurt. I let her know my feelings, to which she lets me know what I was doing wrong in this situation, which is essentially what I'm going to be talking about most of this time. Literally, this is a real conversation that I had as I was putting this presentation together. So I thought I would share that, because it doesn't matter how much you know, if you're not in a space where you can be present and intentional about being ready to hear what someone is trying to tell you, it's just not something that comes as naturally. And we'll talk about why that is. But I do want you to take a moment to just consider how a similar conversation happens every day in your role as a team lead, or if one has happened. So on your paper, in your workbooks, just think about the last time that someone brought an idea to you, or a problem, or started a conversation with you, and you replied immediately with advice or a solution or an alternative path. So I just want you to think about some of the interactions that you've had over the past, I don't know, let's say you could probably find something in the past month. That would be an example. And just write down that specific, like the individual, and that you notice that, yeah, you know what, I did come right back with a new idea, a solution, an alternative path, a problem in what their idea was. Yeah, but that won't work. Or, yeah, but what about this? And sometimes when it happens, you can actually see the sales deflate when someone's coming to you and they had something and they were excited, and you can just feel the energy of a conversation kind of slip away. And what I think is important to note is it's okay. These are things that just happen. This is natural human. And I will explain more about that. But just to be able to acknowledge that, oh yeah, actually, I probably could have been more receptive. I probably could have left more space in that conversation. I wonder what would have happened if I had. So I'll show you an alternative conversation. What if I was practicing effective listening, what that might have looked like with my daughter. So in it, she lets me know what her idea is. Uh, she, and instead of me coming back with alternative ideas, I leave it open. I keep the conversation open to explore it with her. I'm typing a very long time. Oh, my graphic isn't working. Let's see here. Sorry, my computer doesn't like this little graphic. It was so fancy the first time. So in the conversation, I leave it open. And instead of coming back with another idea, I say, oh, that's interesting. And she adds more to the conversation saying, oh, Katie told me about it. I think I want to do this. In the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh, like, I don't want to drive her to Inwood. That's 25 minutes away. Like, how is she going to get there? And I'm not excited about her idea. And she comes back with, you know, I talked with my friend and she thinks it's going to be great. So then I respond with, you know, that's interesting. It seems like you've thought a lot about it. Have you considered how you'll get there? And from that response, we're able to solve a problem that she had, but she doesn't feel shut down like I did in the first conversation. I might have to kill my share and start again. Please stay tuned for these technical difficulties. How many people were able to find or think of a situation where they had like kind of where they shut someone down or weren't as receptive? Yeah, see some hands. It's so common, especially if you're just trying to like run down a whole list of things and be like, yep, nope, here's the problem with that, next. It's so common. All right, let's see if we can do this again. Try to get too fancy in one of these and boom, trouble, trouble. Keep it simple, Tracy. What's happening here? There we go. So here's how, and I actually showed this to my 14-year-old daughter and I said, how would this conversation have felt for you? Because I asked if I was allowed to share this in front of other people and she gave me permission. And she's like, well, that would have been a better conversation. And in this conversation, I specifically would have asked, what are you looking for from me? Like, what do you need from me? Instead of assuming that she was looking for my advice, which a 14-year-old is never looking for your advice. Never. And most of your team members, sometimes they're looking for advice, sometimes that's not the thing. And she tells me what she's looking for, and I'm able to express my concern in an open dialogue conversation, which then allows for that concern to be explored without her feeling I shut her down, which is likely to mean she's not going to probably tell me about her ideas until they're already like committed to, and then I'm not really a part of the decision process at all. The exponential effects of good listening ripple out for so long. When people feel safe and comfortable to come and talk to you about their ideas, and that experience is a positive one, they will do it more. We're going to talk about why that's important, but first let's talk about what it looks like. So being an effective listener means being able to really get what someone is trying to say to you, really get it. So this can show up when someone is giving you criticism and asking for changes in your behavior. It's really hard for someone to share feedback like that. And so being able to receive it, fully receive it and understand what they're trying to say is so important when someone is showing up and giving you that gift. Effective listening comes in when you're trying to understand what someone is thinking before making judgments. We have this ability to carry stories, of the past and apply it to this situation. So this is what they must be meaning. And stories get in the way of us understanding, of really understanding, and they create this miscommunications that have all kinds of impacts. So effective listening is when you check your story to understand the message. So what do I believe to be true? Is it possible I'm wrong? Especially if someone's coming to you with a problem and it's not really being received well. When you're encouraging team members to share and then giving them the space to share. So one of the most effective ways to have ideas show up is by leaving room for them to happen. I have someone in my life who is really good at pointing some things out with my own communication style, which I'm always working on, and pointed out that some people don't talk first, they think first. And so when you're asking a question in a group, leaving space for the people who think first to then be able to talk. Again, that's about effective listening and being present and understanding who's got something to share. Another way that effective listening shows up is by imagining someone else's point of view. So to understand what perspective someone is bringing to a discussion really helps you to see the world from a broader sense. Everyone's got their own experiences, unique paths that they've crossed, different situations they've come across, and different values and belief sets. And so they're bringing up a unique perspective when they're sharing something from their experience, and imagining where they're coming from rather than not trying to understand. That's just going to increase the information you have available, right? The information you have available when you're trying to make decisions, so you can make even better decisions. So being able to see from someone else's perspective means that you're not trying to compare or judge or analyze what someone is saying, but you're trying to understand where they're coming from in saying it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as well. But first, let's test your listening skills. In your workbook is a link. It's an evaluation. It's going to take a few minutes to go through. I'll give you about 7 minutes to go through and answer the questions. But go ahead and just go through each question and see where you score at the end. So if you scored between 14 and 29, you need to work on your listening skills. People likely don't feel like you're paying attention to them when they talk, and potentially feel like you just don't get them. If you scored between 30 and 49, you're an okay listener, but there's definitely room for improvement. As someone who leads a team or wants to lead a team, just focusing on building your capacity to listen is going to help your team overall and the impact that you can have. And if you scored between a 50 and a 70, you're a good listener. People feel you listen to them and that you're approachable, and they often share their ideas with you. So keep up the good work. One thing you can be thinking about is sometimes there's situations where you're a better listener than others, and we're going to talk about the difference there. Sometimes we are great listeners when it's easy and not such great listeners when it's hard. All right, so tested your listening skills, check. But if you scored kind of in the middle, don't feel bad. As humans, we have a whole bunch of things working against us and why we're not always such great listeners. So, first, we're actually wired to make sense of the world in the most efficient and effective way possible. So, our brains are actually ready to jump to conclusions and use a whole bunch of mental heuristics that happens automatically because it just wants to get to the point faster. We just want to get to the thing. And so we're making stuff up subconsciously, which gets in the way of really being able to listen. We're wired to evaluate. We're wired to know where we stand in the world. Our pro-social skills are dependent on us being a safe member of a tribe, right? We're tribal beings. And so our brain is wired to actually compare and evaluate things like how right are we, how much someone agrees with us, and if we know more or less than someone, where do we rank? It's how our brain considers if we're safe or not with our tribe. Are we going to stay connected to this tribe? So if we can catch that analytic skeptic mind from being active as we're taking in what someone is trying to say, we're more likely to be open to possibilities or encourage ideas, something that could turn into something huge and just create space for open dialogue, which of course are all good things for strong teams. Another thing working against us is we all have different values. So if you value efficiency, it's likely that you see the world through optimizing your time. So you might see productivity as a measure of direct output, and you might have a lower value on relationships. So in that case, it's likely that you don't naturally value listening over doing. It's possible that you consider conversation kind of an unfortunate means to an end. And so if you're one of the people who really want to be efficient, just consider how that might affect how you're showing up in a conversation, because we're wired to have these different values. Another thing coming against us is that as social beings, we're wired to connect and to create connection, and connection is often done through sharing, that is, talking. So this can show up in different ways for a person depending on the context. But if you've ever seen two people who are in a conversation, but they're just talking at each other, it doesn't even seem like the other person is really hearing what's being said. They're just like coming back with another sentence, and there doesn't really seem like there's coherence in the conversation. Connection happens because people share their ideas and they want to talk, which doesn't necessarily bode well for the listening end when people are ready to jump in with what they're going to say. So with all that being said, though, effective listening, there's skills that you can learn, that you can practice, that you can improve, that you can level up. First is by considering the possibility that there's room to improve your listening skills. Maybe, like I mentioned, sometimes usually you're a good listener, but there's certain situations where you find it really hard to be present with someone else. So taking the time to kind of think through some of those patterns and situations so that those are where you're going to focus. And second is by having the knowledge of what you have going against you, why listening is not so easy, and why we can kind of have fun with it as humans. Like, oh, I'm totally in my own head right now. Just give me a second, right? You can have fun with it. We're humans. This is what our brains are doing, and we can just be better because we know. So let's talk about what it looks like to intentionally work on your listening skills. With any area that you're working to build capacity in, the first step is to know thyself. How are your listening skills? You can consider asking your team members if there are times when they really feel heard or times when they don't feel heard. What situations? Ask your family members and friends, do they feel like you listen? Watch for patterns and when you're a better listener and when you don't really show up in that way. And then you decide if it's an area that you really want to change. Do you really want to put energy into this? Do you really see areas that, man, if I was more present in that conversation, I wonder if that individual would have shared that problem. I wonder if the team would have come up with a solution that they all believed in and we all got behind. So decide if it's an area that you really want to put energy into. And if it is something that you really want to build capacity around, of course, I encourage you to enlist the help of a coach, even for a brief accountability program. Otherwise, just make note of instances that you want to start getting better at. This is the plan for improvement, whether it's one-on-ones, team meetings, at the supper table. But really the next part, the practice, is the most fun. We're going to get some practicing done. And building capacity, like I said, in this type of skill requires intentional activities and reflection for a period of time. 3 months or more is often what I encourage when you're looking at building a skill like this. Slowly over time, your mind starts to slow down and you get more and more effective at being present with the person and getting their world. And you'll start to notice different voices showing up for you, different people coming to you more, different ideas coming to you, because being heard feels really good and it's good for the whole team. All right, so in order to practice, and like I said, we will spend some time practicing, we have to be thinking about a few of these pieces. And there's kind of a flow that you can build a practice around when you're in a conversation, in dialogue, in a meeting. So first is just to be thinking about presence, what it means to be present. And I mean really present. And we're going to spend some time on that. We have to remember our intention in any dialogue. The intention, are we remembering our intention to listen, to understand? Perhaps the intention of this conversation is to explain, but really thinking about what's the intention? What is my intention in this conversation? And then we need to be able to focus inward. We have to be able to be fully aware of what's happening in our own internal world so that we know how we're showing up. And we're going to spend some more time on this. You know, it's one of my favorite areas. Then we're going to be, then you got to be thinking about focusing out. So focus in, how am I showing up? Focus out. Just the practice of engaging and watching your partner's experience. What are they going for? What are they trying to show you with their body language and their words? And then there's like this stepping out of the entire experience. This is called the 3 perspectives. So focus in on myself, on my partner, and then on us as a group, as a conversation happening. Am I presenting myself in a way that carries the message I want to send? How's our body language together? Are we engaged with each other? Am I open and interested? Do they look open and interested? If I was a fly on the wall, what does this environment look like? And then back to being engaged and focused on understanding your speaker's world, your person who's trying to tell you something. So this is a bit of a dance that you go through, this shifting of perspectives as you sort through the experience you want to create from all angles. And this takes practice, but it becomes invaluable in every single relationship that you're a part of. So get ready because we're going to do some practicing. Let's get a little uncomfortable. I'm just going to check here because we have 83 participants. We're going to do some breakout rooms in a bit, but first, let's practice some mindfulness, some presence. Love it. So presence is about not letting your mind wander or worry about the future and not letting your mind carry regret and stories from the past. So presence is the act of being grounded in the current moment and experiencing it completely from the inside out and the outside in. Presence and mindfulness, they take practice. Just a side note that the IQOS team is looking for a pilot team to test a mindfulness practice. So similar to the morning practice that CK was going through as part of a study on we're doing. So if you know a team that might be interested in trying, just reach out to me. Because mindfulness takes practice and to build a habit, and you have to train your brain to build a routine of being present. So I just walk through that flow of getting present, setting your intention, checking inward, looking outward, observing from around and then back out. It's this shifting of focus, but this isn't something we naturally do. It is very yoga-like. It's also empathy. And if you look at empathy and the value of empathy in connection and team members and team engagement, this is empathy of trying to how am I showing up and affecting someone? Am I showing up in the way that they're most likely to be able to be open and feel safe? And then noticing how they're showing up so that you can update what you're presenting if it's necessary so that they can feel more safe and open. So yes, it's like yoga, it's mindfulness, it's empathy, the science behind these things, although some people are like, whoa, yoga, like mindfulness, meditation, but the science behind it now is catching up with what they're finding happens with brains and transmission of ideas when people are able to engage in conversation to this level. So by show of hands, how many people have done some sort of mindfulness work? Some sort of, yeah. And mindfulness is different than meditation, by the way. Meditation is like a focus, whereas mindfulness is about trying to be present. And they are different. Okay, yeah, so some people have. So I've talked before about just trying to be the best human you can be, to be the best leader you can be, because that's what our teams deserve of us. And mindfulness is actually one of the most powerful skills you can have when evolving into be the best leader you can be. The ability to check in with how you're showing up and how you're impacting other people. It's the meditation practice and mindfulness practice, the art of slowing down and being present. It changes your biology and your nervous system, and your nervous system affects how you show up, and that affects how people receive you. It's all so connected. There is science behind it. If people are like, Tracy, I don't believe it, I can point you to some science. I tried to lay off the stats because I really want to practice. So one of the first steps to that level of awareness is being able to tune into your own body and to check to see how you're showing up in a moment. And you can easily do this through the practice of a body scan if you're familiar with mindfulness-based stress reduction. This is one of the first steps, is like to check in with how are you showing up. So first, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, and we're going to practice tuning into your body and your nervous system. And so as you become more practiced at this will just be like a little switch. You won't be so intentional, but just like you're building any skill, you kind of do it very intentional, step by step, and then you know it, and you can't unknow it, and then you have it available in your back pocket. So with your eyes closed, I want you to take a deep breath in, filling the belly and then the chest, and a slow exhale out. And as you continue with your eyes closed, I want you to just gently shift your focus to your face, your eyebrows and your jawline, and just notice how it is. Just notice. Is it tight? Is it furrowed? Is it soft and relaxed? What's your face doing? Just notice it. Don't try to give it a label or make sense of it. Just notice. All right, now shift your focus on through to your shoulders and your neck and just notice how they are. Are your shoulders pulled up tight, almost at your ears? Is your neck stiff and tight? Or are your shoulders dropped back and relaxed? Again, just noticing, just exploring. We're just checking in on our physical body to see what it's telling, what it's sharing. We're going to move the focus to your breath. Just notice where your breath is happening. Is it in the top of your chest? Shallow, maybe lower by your heart, or maybe deep down in your belly from the morning mindfulness, our meditation, and Wim Hof? Just notice where it is. Now we're just going to shift and explore through the rest of your body, down through your back, through your legs, checking out your hands. How are you sitting? Are you tense and contracted? Are you open and relaxed? Just notice. And as you move your focus around your body, moving through the muscles of your legs to your feet, checking out your toes and back up again. Continue to move your focus upward, back through the breath. Where is it there? Just noticing. To the shoulders, to the face, to the backs of your eyelids, eyes still closed. Just notice how your physical body is, where any tension lives, where contraction lives. Perhaps your body is contracted and tense and signaling a reaction to the environment, a fight or flight response. Just be curious about this. What's your body reacting to? What does it sense or believe that it has the need to feel contracted and tense? And it's okay, just noticing. Or perhaps your body's gently and openly sitting in your chair, just exploring the moment with ease. Either is perfectly okay. Your intention here is to connect your mind to your body to see what it's telling you. Now, maybe you're in a bit of a contracted state and you want to move to a more open state, a state of being that signals approachability, safety, openness. So as you sit with your eyes closed, let's explore through your body one more time. And starting with your face, just let your face relax and soften. Noticing the tension fall from the temples and the jawline as you breathe in and out. Move through the neck and the shoulders. And we're going to inhale and bring your shoulders up in a tight pinch to your ears. And as you exhale, you roll them back and drop them down. One more time for those shoulders. Inhale to your ears. And exhale and roll them back. Noticing how tension feels to be sliding down your back and to the seat of your chair with those exhales. And sit relaxed in your chair and open your arms and body, letting your tension slide. Move your focus to your breath and place your hand on your belly. And inhale, feeling your hand rise under your belly. You're looking to get the breath right into the belly there, deeper than your chest. Inhale under your hand. And exhale, feeling your shoulders soften. And if you're having a hard time feeling open, that's okay. Your body is signaling maybe that it doesn't feel so safe, and that's okay. Just be curious about what you're afraid of. Notice where your breathing is. We're just going to take a few minutes while you breathe into your hand. The body and the mind are connected directly through the breath. This is why breath work is so impactful. When your mind forces your breathing to slow down, your body's stress levels, the heart rate, the blood pressure, the nervous system relaxes. If you were to breathe in shallow in your chest, you would actually put your body into a cyclical state of stress. The nervous system would respond thinking that you're being threatened. So at any time, you can take a few short belly breaths and slow down your nervous system. All right, one more breath in and breath out. And come back to the room, slowly opening your eyes. This is the mind-body connection. And the reason that it's so important is because our minds are so busy. And we can be in a situation and not even realize that we're short, we're curt, we're showing up in a way that burns bridges, that doesn't create connection. But when you can get your mind to just connect into your body, you can understand what's happening at that deeper unconscious level, and then you can use your mind to bring your body to a place that's more likely to create connection and get what you want. So, because how you show up in any moment is just so hugely important, right? So you can practice a body scan before a one-on-one, before a difficult conversation, or even just notice yourself getting heated in a discussion. It's amazing to hear someone say, I just need to pause this conversation for a moment and check in because I notice I'm getting really triggered about something. That's just noticing that your nervous system is responding. And when your nervous system is responding, your cortisol level goes higher, your prefrontal cortex shuts down. You're going to say and do things that aren't necessarily how you'd want to show up. You're not going to be in that effective listening state. So this mind-body connection, although it's easy to be like, oh, wow, this meditation, mindfulness, that's not for the workplace. It absolutely is, because when you can practice presence and mindfulness in any conversation, you can show up just exactly how you intend to, which will have the most impact on your team members. So that's mindfulness in a very short practice for body scan. All right, how many people have done that sort of thing before, just by show of hands? Is that familiar? Yeah. Okay, so you're familiar. How many people practice that before a tough conversation? A few, right? So know it, don't do it. This is the knowing doing gap. If you've ever been a session with Clayton, that we all experience of like, I know what I could do, but I'm not in the habit of doing it. And this is where practice comes in. And you can start to like make these little triggers of, okay, before a one-on-one, I'm going to book, or I'm going to take 5 minutes to just do a quick body scan and like bring my nervous system down. What is the situation where you don't typically show up in a good listening space that you could do a quick body scan is like the precursor to it. All right, next, we're going to practice presence. So this is going to be fun. We're going to play a little game, a little noticing game where we practice mindful presence with another person. So this is where, okay, that's fine, Tracy, I can do this by myself. But when I'm with someone else, I'm not really checking in on like, how am I showing up? What's happening for me? And so when we're practicing it, this is where you start to get used to what it feels like and looks like. And then you can practice the behavior again and again and build a habit. But without practicing it, like I said, knowing and doing. If you're not practicing it, you're not actually learning. And so although it may be uncomfortable, staying in it to actually practice and develop these skills is super useful for your team. So we're going to break up into pairs. Don't worry, this one is easy. And when you get into your pair, you're going to choose your partners. So there's going to be partner A and partner B. And all you have to do is partner A will start by saying, being here with you, I notice. And then you just, whatever's happening for you. I notice I'm sweaty. I notice I'm excited. I notice the sky is cloudy. Whatever is real for you in that moment. I notice I'm really nervous. I notice I hate this. I notice I'm uncomfortable. Okay? So whatever you notice about your own experience. And partner B says, hearing that I notice. So, I notice I'm uncomfortable. Hearing that I notice I feel more comfortable. And then partner A comes back with, hearing that I notice. And then the conversation goes like this for 4 minutes, which feels like forever, and then it isn't forever. I promise. I've done this so many times in the groups I've facilitated, both at IQ Metrics and outside of, and the experience of going back and forth with, you don't even have to, it's just hearing that I notice. And the conversation doesn't have to be coherent, right? This is where you're checking in on what's actually happening for you. So being here with you, I notice I'm curious about how your day is going. And maybe for the person responding, hearing that, I notice I'm super bored, right? Like it doesn't have to go back and forth. It doesn't have to be a coherent conversation. It's just whatever is happening for you. And by practicing this, you start to like check in with like, oh, I noticed this about me as I'm in this experience with you. Thanks everyone for participating. That was, I'm very curious if anyone wants to share their experience, what that was like for you.
Uncomfortable.
What was uncomfortable about it? If you don't mind, you can also say, hearing that, I
was,
noticed, I don't want to say.
part of it was just self-awareness of what you're saying and the way you're saying it.
Thank you.
At first I was confused because I didn't know if I was supposed to notice something about the other person or myself, but then I noticed it didn't really matter. We just were noticing and being in the moment.
Awesome, thank you.
I noticed it was easier doing it over. I've done it in person and it's harder to engage in like looking at each other's eyes because that's the exercise. It was like that. And here you're looking at their eyes, but it's actually not directly to the camera, right? So it was somewhat easier.
Oh, interesting, thank you.
I had just escalated a client issue to the person I was paired up with. So it was a little uncomfortable at first, but we were able to get through it and use the being here with you. I know, and so we went through this whole exercise and yeah, got through it and all's good.
I love that.
It was good too because I felt like I'm the person that wants to rush a conversation. I'm so awkward with people, and especially someone I don't know. But this is like it forced you to not, and then eventually by the end of it, we were like, "Oh, sure, time's up." Like that was a lot easier, so it was good.
Anyone else have something they wanted to share?
I think. Oh, go ahead, Andrew. No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I did notice that. Thinking about myself and my presence was a little bit more difficult. I like to focus on the other person when I'm, talking to somebody, and that was a little weird to go. No, I got to think about what's going on inside of me, and yeah, I think that led to some of the uncomfortability at the beginning there.
Thank you.
I'd like to expand on that kind of similarly as well. I found from my experience that trying to focus on what I'm feeling actually kind of helped grow a connection with the other person, especially when you have that ability to empathize with what they're feeling and you kind of share that.
Thank you. One more? No? Okay, we'll keep going then. Yeah, so this, although it may be super uncomfortable, that's my favorite place to be, I'm sorry. Some people will be like, oh, Tracy's doing a session, I'm not going to it. But although it may be uncomfortable, what it does is it helps you practice to notice how your presence and your experience might be impacting the conversation. And it especially comes in handy if you're getting activated and triggered about something. Being able to just check in and be like, oh, I notice this is happening for me. And then to be okay with it. To notice like, whoa, I'm getting passionate about this. And to be okay about it and just say, hey, can you stay with me in this? I want to figure it out. I've been in so many great conversations where you just stay in the conversation and share what's happening and where that dialogue goes and the connection, and then your ability to resolve conflict, to not have as many miscommunications, just it breaks open so many barriers. So although it might be a little uncomfortable, that practicing it is so useful. So consider using some of this language in your conversations too. Oh, I noticed this. I notice this is happening. It's really non-threatening, non-violent language that helps another person to experience your world and to stay with you in a conversation without it becoming about evaluations, comparing, getting defensive. Okay, so that was fun, right? We're gonna do another game. This is about what it's like to be present for a conversation. So we did the mindfulness, we did the focus in, and then we practiced focusing in while we're in a conversation with someone else, and now we're going to practice listening. Yay for listening games. So in this case, the game, we're going to break out into pairs again, and we're going to choose partner A and partner B. Okay, so that's your first step. Who's partner A? Who's partner B? Then we're going to take 20 seconds of silent eye contact. I know, it's like an eye roll. Really, you're going to make me do this? I promise it makes all the difference. And especially if, as you're doing the very awkward eye contact, you just allow yourself to relax a little bit, because I promise it's good. Don't be too scared. This is good for you. So then partner A is going to share. So for 3 minutes, partner A is just going to share whatever is top of mind for them. They're just going to talk. Can be anything, whatever comes up, and you can just keep talking, and you don't have to force it. You don't have to have like 135 words a minute and make sure you fill 3 minutes exactly, but just share something with partner B. Then partner B is going to take 1 minute to reflect back. What I heard you say was, they're not going to try to make sense of it. They're not going to interpret it. They're just going to say, reflect back what they heard. What I heard you say was. Then partner A is going to add, clarify, and reiterate. So I was saying, and this, don't elaborate and start a whole new topic or get too far off of what you originally said. Just add and clarify. So that's 2 minutes of that. And then partner B is going to reflect back their felt experience. So hearing that, when you said this, I felt this way. And partner B can also share what I think I get about you now, what I think I've learned about you now that you've shared that, what I think I know about you, or what I think I understand about you now, for 2 minutes. So you're going to 20 seconds of eye contact. I know, it's okay. You can do this. 3 minutes of sharing a story, 1 minute to reflect back, 2 minutes to add, clarify, and then 2 minutes to reflect on own experience. And then we're going to switch and repeat. So then partner B will share for 3 minutes. So we're going to break up into our breakout groups.
Sorry, Tracy, just to clarify something.
Of course.
For that last step with partner B, reflect own experience and what they get about partner, should that be A?
Reflect back. Partner B reflects back. So partner A shares a story, something that's in their world. Partner B reflects back, I heard this. Partner A adds, clarifies, and then partner B says how they were impacted by the share.
Okay, and then what they get about themselves, not about partner A?
Oh, about partner A. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? The instructions will be in the Slack channel too, just to kind of keep it.
Will there be messages about the time, or we have to keep track of it?
Yeah, I will. Here, I think I can add it. Options. Breakdown. Okay. I'll broadcast messages after the 20 seconds and after each kind of segment of time. And if you fall a little bit behind, it's okay. I notice I'm getting rushed. It's okay. Okay, I'm gonna recreate so you end up with different people. Have fun. 20 seconds. Welcome back. Like to look at the faces and see what's happening as people come back in the room. I was saying it's much more rewarding to do this in a large conference room where you can wander around and kind of understand, but like to pop into a breakout room is very disruptive to the exercise. So I just sit here and hope you guys are having a blast. Anyone want to share their experience?
Yeah, I made a friend.
Excellent.
It was interesting to try to connect with their perspective and how easy that was. I was actually surprised about how easy I could connect to their situation. And so that was interesting.
Thank you.
I think it was, go ahead.
No, please.
Okay, I think it was really interesting to get to know Mike a little bit better and see him from a different angle, because you kind of come at it without an agenda of what you're going to discuss, and it was a really valuable experience.
I was worried about the imposed structure, and that it would feel not like a conversation and like we're forcing a conversation, but then it actually didn't feel all that dissimilar from conversations I normally have. And it felt like a natural flow, even with the little pop-ups dinging and going, oh, by the way, it's the next part. It just worked.
Great, thank you.
I think part of that is just because Andrew and I generally have pretty good conversations together, so.
Thank you.
Turns out that the person I was paired up with, him and I both have a lot of things in common, even very similar stories about how we ended up working at IQ. So it wasn't really awkward at all. It was really good.
Thank you.
Conversation was really good, but man, that's staring for 20 minutes or 20 seconds, not 20 minutes. Woo!
Yeah. Yeah. Did anyone else have an experience with a 20-second connection that they wanted to share?
I actually didn't find it awkward at all. I think because it was just over Zoom as opposed to being in person. If it was in person, I totally would have been like, this is super awkward. But like over Zoom staring at the screen, I didn't have like any awkwardness or any reaction to it.
I wasn't sure if I was supposed to like stare at the video or should I have stared at the camera. So there was a little bit of hesitation as like, should I be looking there or down there? Or it was a bit awkward on Zoom.
Thank you.
I found myself trying to remember if I was in a staring contest or if I could blink. Like I was like, what actually is this?
Oh.
Yeah.
And the other thing too was we didn't set a 20-second timer, so that got even more awkward. It's like, has it been 20 seconds yet?
Right. So when you're instructed to listen with the expectation that you're going to reflect back, that you're there to hear, and that you're not supposed to have an answer or like be able to respond directly to what they're saying when you're there, you're showing up to just hear. Your ability to listen really does become a superpower. What you can learn about someone, how it opens up the space for conversation. And this is something you can practice in your one-on-ones and basically any conversation, just the art of really hearing what someone is trying to tell you without jumping to have a response, because you'll have time for a response. You'll figure it out. You don't have to be thinking of it ahead of time. So to be just sitting and like receiving is a superpower. You're listening to understand, not to respond, and it's just an entirely different way of showing up in a conversation. The other reason that this is effective is because you're listening without an agenda. You didn't have something that you needed to get from the other person. You didn't have any goals in the conversation other than just to listen, to understand, and just to recognize the shift that happens when you're sitting without an agenda, and when that can be really, really effective. Because when you're listening without an agenda, what happens is you remove this filter that runs every sentence through. Will this get me what I want? Are they saying what I need them to say? When you have that agenda, you're filtering what is being said. All right, last exercise. This one is much easier. So now you know how to check in on how you're showing up, how to be in a conversation and notice what's going on for you, and how to show up in a conversation and to listen. This next part, we're going to just break down some common dialogue situations that you're involved in and start to look at opportunities where new habits could emerge, where you could be even better. So, when we did that original, how good are you at listening? And, if you fell in kind of the middle, or even if you're on the high end, there's likely some scenarios, like when my daughter texts me in the middle of the day and tells me she's going to get a job 25 minutes away, that she catches me in a place where I'm not really doing effective listening. So, and this is where it's like really easy to say, oh yeah, I want to be a better listener, but it's just more complicated than that, right? It's about really identifying where is it going to make a difference? What's the situations? What are the patterns that prevent you from being present and hearing what someone's trying to say? And then using those to help you identify the trigger that you can replace to do better, to build a new habit. So in your workbook, you find the little worksheet with a table in it, and it's got these 3 columns. So you'll just take some time to write down the situation. What are some common situations you find yourself in where your ability to listen has an impact on relationships, ideas, safety, that sort of thing? So an example might be one-on-ones. Maybe you check Slack while you're in a one-on-one. And you can write down in the situation when you're in one-on-ones that you're not present. So instead of opening Slack to check it, when you feel that urge, every time you think about Slack, you can use that as a reminder to come back to focus out to the human in front of you. You can start to use your triggers to change your behaviors. Or maybe an example is when people catch you running to the bathroom. You have back-to-back meetings and you haven't got up in 3 hours and you just need to get to the bathroom really quick, and someone catches you in the hallway and they've got something to ask you. You're not going to be present. That's very common. And to be able to build a habit of, rather than trying to answer them, to give them the, hey, can you check back with me? Come by my desk later. Building those habits so that people are used to coming to you and being heard. One disclaimer though is that if someone comes by your desk and they're asking you to find the bathroom, you can just tell them where the bathroom is. But let's take 5 minutes to work through this, and if you have any questions, feel free to message me or ask. But just think about some situations. And you can come back to this after. It's just one of those tools you can do to get really intentional about, you know what, I really do want to show up for my team in a different way. I really do want to make sure they feel that I'm a safe place to talk to. I create open space for ideas. I'm not undermining their ideas. I'm not talking over people or taking over great discussion. And so you can kind of do this type of exercise to get really intentional about what your habits, how they're showing up. We'll keep going here. Because I just want to cover quickly, like knowing when to listen and when to talk. Because as a team lead, there's going to be situations where it's not just about listening, right? So the biggest skill you can build to fine tune the art is the act of mindfulness, like I said. So just being mindfully aware of how you're showing up in a conversation, which will mean you're paying attention to what is being said, what needs to be said, and when something needs to be said. And you know, in Scott's session about effective questions, how he was talking about patience and pace. These are all parts of knowing how to show up in a conversation. But the goal of knowing when to listen and when to talk is to encourage conversation that builds the relationship, that connects yourself as a leader to your team, that encourages the sharing of ideas, concerns, enables your team. Because when you enable your team to bring their ideas rather than coming to you for the solution, you're building capacity, right? Capacity that the company needs to evolve. Every time you provide the solution to a question, you're signaling to the team member that they can't figure it out themselves and they should come to you to solve the problems. So when to listen and when to talk, when you're thinking about enabling others, the goal of knowing when to listen and when to talk is to encourage conversation that builds the relationship, right? So that's what, when you're telling something, when you're sharing an idea, often it's easier to, or more effective to share it in the form of experience and stories and avoid solutioning so that someone can interpret it and add your experience to their ideas rather than feeling like you're giving them the answer. So you can, in communicating, you can use stories and avoid solutioning. But like I said, it's all starting with mindfulness to know kind of when to. So another one is check assumptions. If you're offering an alternative solution, you may have an assumption like assuming they haven't considered it, right? So like with my daughter, when I'm telling her that she needs to consider how she's getting there, I spoke in a way that assumed she hadn't already thought about it. But by using language that leaves room for a question rather than assuming, you're going to keep that dialogue open. And then you're building that relationship and the confidence that your team has in themselves. So, and this can just look like, you probably already thought of this, but have you considered? Or what I'm wondering is if you're able to explore this option, or have you been able to explore this option? What other options have you explored? Again, that kind of goes into the effective questions. And finally, getting explicit clarity. What are you needing from me? What are you looking for here? Were you wanting to just share this? Did you want some advice? Do you want my ideas? What are you needing from me right now? If you practice asking a question before responding in a conversation, you're going to create space to overcome your own habits and then enable the individual to ask for what they really need. So we really did cover a lot of ground today. We're just wrapping up here. We looked at why listening is important in building connections, creating space and safety, why it's so hard. We're wired not necessarily to be good listeners. We looked at, are you a good listener? Talked about how to become a better listener by learning to be present, checking your intention, increasing awareness from multiple perspectives, practice presence with yourself and with others. We practice listening to understand and without an agenda. And then we checked in on some habits to look for patterns where you could show up as a better listener. Like I mentioned, the importance of listening is often overlooked, and the implications of signaling that you don't care when someone is saying something or you don't care what they are saying just has long-lasting impacts to the individual, of course, the team, and then the company. So as a leader, when you work on the ability to just show up in a conversation with the intention of seeking to understand and then leaving room to enable another person, this is how you're building capacity, right? This is how you're enabling your team. And that's one of the measures of a good leader. Can you build your team to be bigger than the sum of the parts? That's all I have for you today. If you've got any questions, I can stick around for them. I know that my time is up. So any questions?
Thanks, Tracy.
Right. Oh, hey, Tracy.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, okay. The one thing I noticed about listening is that when you're crunched on time, usually you just want to get your, get whatever you can get out, and then, you know, when the time is up, you just want to make sure you have all you needed. How do you, I mean, with the exercise that we did, we had a time constraint. So time is a big factor in listening that I find. If I find that if I have a one-on-one, it is 30 minutes and I have to get through the points that I have. Usually when someone takes like maybe 10 minutes on something that maybe I thought I needed just, you know, maybe a 10-second answer, I feel like I don't want to be rude and interrupt, but at the same time, I have to be mindful of the time. How do you deal with something like that?
Great question. There's a lot loaded in there. One is whose time is a one-on-one for, and the other is being able to just notice and be mindful. I notice that I really want to hear what you're saying, and I notice we're crunched for time. Can we set some more time, because this is important, right? Being able to just notice that you're feeling that rush and then creating space for it. Does that answer? I lost your...
Yeah, it does. Over here. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for playing, being a little uncomfortable if you were a little uncomfortable. I really appreciate you sticking with me. Take care and have fun listening.